Whoa, we are back for more Bleach Soul Resonance, and we're going to be doing weekly questions megathread. So it was posted 2 days ago by Comprehensive Toe, of course. Shout out for getting this out, and we're going to just be answering some questions from the community. I try to do this once a week just to, you know, fill out some content, especially when we're in lower drive periods, and also just to answer questions that people might have and collect things that might be confusing, right? Because while Bleach Soul Resonance might not be a PvP game or something, there are still a handful of things that escape people. There are a lot of new players coming in. Bleach Soul Resonance actually has done very well in recent times, and it's good to see the game sustaining. And because of that, I know people might have questions, but without dilly-dallying anymore, let's just get to the first one, which is Busy Bat Forever says, my question is, does Nelliel 0 offer a great DPS upgrade compared to Tosen 1 for Gin? Like, is it worth pulling and investing, or is it skippable? Furthermore, Tosen and Gin at 0 or minimum boundaries seems to be able to clear most current content anyway, says FF. Granted, I acknowledge stage 6 of the trials, I don't know the name, and the 20th and 25th stage of the limited trial does suggest you need much higher boundaries, and I'm not even sure if a Nell can accomplish completing them. Well, this is interesting, right? Because, I actually don't know if my capture's going to be working. One second. Okay, it is. This is interesting because two things are posed here. Can Tosen B1 do it? And how much does Nelliel affect the game? As well as, I guess a third one actually has to do with when do you quote-unquote need to pull? Because it's a PvE game, you technically never really need to pull on anything that you don't want to. But we can sort of hedge our bets and get value out of our pulls by understanding like what these pieces of content need and what is generically strong in PvE gacha games. The issue with Tosen, and I've said this before, is that right now you start your game with Tosen, you start up your Bleach Soul Resonance account, and you might like Tosen a lot. You got B1 Tosen, you have all these little boundaries, and a lot of you who have seen my previous videos talking about boundaries might know where I'm about to go with this, but you start it up, you get this character. You will slowly come to realize that what Tosen does is really only similar to Komamura and Byakuya. When you use Aizen and Yorihara and Nelliel, even though Yorihara isn't a tactics character, right? You'll put together the pieces of this painting that I'm talking about, which is what characters like Nelliel and Aizen and Yorihara do is a serviceable amount of damage, you know. Sometimes in the case of Nelliel and Aizen, an explosive amount of damage, especially if you get Aizen up to B4, you know, or even, you know, B1. But more than that, they're actually supporting and debuffing in really obvious ways. Whereas Tosen, while he does have a few instances of support somewhere on his kit, I don't even remember where it is if I'm honest. Yeah, enemy thrust resistance, technically he's a debuff, right? More so what Tosen is doing beyond just giving 30% thrust damage bonus, which really isn't anything remarkable when you compare it to, you know, the rest of the support that the other characters are giving. What he's mostly doing is being a very selfish character. So to get Tosen up to the level where he's doing the same damage as a Nelliel, you actually do need to hit these higher benchmarks, these higher breakpoints of boundaries, because his kit is just flatly weaker. So, you know, Flash Strike 2 times, 100% more ailment damage by Tosen specifically. Wound damage is 100% more. Wound doesn't drop off instantly anymore. And these are attainable, but these are obviously just weaker than the boundaries of limited characters. So we see increased Tosen's ailment damage by 100%. I mean, yeah, 100% of Tosen's ailment damage, right? And by comparison, that was Tosen's 4, but obviously he's a free-to-play character. He's a standard character. You'll just get more of him eventually. If you were to spend those same resources, like focusing on Nelliel, especially since it sounds like this person has a new account, you would have 80% crit damage to your entire team when this character ults and uses her generic rotation. You stack that on top of having a hugely crit damage stacking character like Urahara, and then after they both ult, you might be giving, I mean, what is the total? What would the total number be? 35% of 107. You might be giving like 111 or something like that. Complete crit damage to your team, just flatly, right? Now again, like I said, compare that to Tosen, who all of his boundaries and skills mostly are in service of himself. So is there a difference? Yes, of course there is. However, there's a second part of this question that is impossible to ignore, which is, furthermore, Tosen and Gin at 0 or minimum boundaries seem to be able to clear most current content, such as FF. Now, this is something I really rail on. I do. If you see me talk about this in Dokkan, then you know where I stand on the concept of pull for content. Pull for content. You don't actually need a character like Nell if you feel like you can get the most amount of Jade out of your week. That is 100% true. Could you push to maybe place in Tower? Could you push to maybe place in Frenzy Feast? Could you push to maybe place here or there, that and there? Of course you could. But ultimately, when we talk about pulling for characters and value of characters, we are sort of going in there with the expectation that you just want your best version of your account. But if your best version of the account is, I just want to, you know, have Tosen, have Gin, have Rangiku, and then save until Bonk or Vastalord Ichigo and get dupes in him, then sure, you know, there's nothing wrong with that on principle. You know, these will only be benchmarks, things like placing, things like this and that, if you think it's sort of cool that low spending and free to play players can, you know, carve out a top 50 spot for themselves, right? So that's how I feel about that. This is a great question because I do think that this is worth talking about, is pull around content. And right now we are in the point where Bleach Soul Resonance has been out for a few months. It's not been out long enough that they really need to rush out huge sweeping changes. We really haven't had dead weeks, had moments where we can just chill, had moments where, you know, they are just trying to play catch up. So we've been getting new stuff. If it comes out that, hey, the next time we have a celebration, not as much new hard content, not as much this and that, no explosive meta changes, it really wouldn't be that big of a deal, if I'm honest. You know, Dokkan's been out for 11 years. Naruto Mobile's been out for like 8 years or something like that, maybe 10 years. I don't even know at this point. Epic 7, which is not an IP gacha at all, has been out for 7 years. Like, there's going to be a moment where they take it a little easy. There is. And you'll be able to ask yourself, hey, do I actually need some of these new characters if nothing's really coming out? And, you know, that'll, in the long run, that'll be a question that saves you from missing out on Boundary 2 Nelliels of the future. Like, you know, Boundary 2 pure DPS Aizen, you know? So, yeah, good question. So here we find someone saying, you know, they just got Aizen at B1 and they're trying to figure out how to build him. And if you saw the people talking about it, then, you know, the question is sort of answered in its fullness here. So obviously I don't have B1 Aizen, and, you know, I don't have, you know, bonus core stamps here. So his power is going to be saved at sort of just like a 34,000 and 35,000 without sort of being able to bump up any higher. But we sort of know what like Aizen is looking for, right? So if you go to, oh my god, where am I going? Stamp. Attack percent on the first one. You could also go spirit percent. Both are fine. Crit damage 3, very funnily, is what I have on this one. I've decided not to go any further on this piece because I do think that in later stages of the character, I would prefer to get maybe a spirit or attack percent with a little bit of crit rate, crit damage. But you can see I've sort of just stopped here. Crit rate percent on the second piece. Crit rate percent is very important for characters who do not generate a bunch of crit rate by themselves. Aizen does hand out crit damage, so you could argue that he mostly just needs you to be able to crit. In this case, I have a 30 piece that has HP on it. Obviously, I would prefer a secondary piece that had maybe crit rate, attack. If we see here, yeah, no real crit rate pieces to replace, right? But I would definitely prefer a piece that had crit rate on the main stat, some attack percent, some more crit rate, and then some crit damage. I mostly went with this one because of the crit damage. And then another attack percent here. This is more like what we'd actually want, which is attack percent, another attack stat, crit damage, crit rate. Again, though, he would be much, much better if I could look here and maybe see, yeah, I see attack percent, maybe see like attack percent, crit rate, crit damage, ult charge might even be better here. I really just haven't gone back for Aizen because, you know, ultimately, once a character is doing their job, you don't need to just pile on endlessly, you know, more and more reasons to like perfect their gear. At least in the case of Aizen as well, he is getting 25% crit rate rather, just from having his weapon stamp. So, you know, it's not the biggest deal, but yeah, those are the stats you're gonna be able to be looking for at Aizen. It's pretty. He's one of those characters that's like pretty self-explanatory, right? He's not a very complicated character in that way. So here we have someone asking about their Nelliel, who is B1. They're wondering what is better for Nelliel. Attack percent or ailment damage on stamp 3. I have a 170/65 ratio on element, and I'm yet to get a good attack percent piece. I mean, ultimately, and I've made this point a lot, you're gonna drive yourself crazy going for perfect gear. If your benchmark is whales. I really don't think it is that important beyond getting a solid foundation of like 30s and things like that. Like I said, there's only so much, for example, stars you're going to have. I have 59 here, but I spent quite a few in the recent time. We've got attack percent on the first piece with crit rate, ult charge, attack percent. This could be way better. This could use crit damage. This defense roll is bad. This is crit rate percent on it. This has ailment damage. Ult charge again is kind of a whatever stat here. HP again is a bad stat. Crit rate here, we could have crit damage and attack percent on. Could just be way better. And we have pulled pieces that look better, like this one, but we would be sacrificing so much crit rate. And again, this one, we would be sacrificing so much crit rate. And lastly, we sort of find our attack percent here, attack, crit damage, ailment. This is what I would consider like my preferred Nelliel piece, though. If I could get that flat stat to be crit rate, that would have been much better, of course. But, you know, c'est la vie, right? Like, I would drive myself crazy trying to get the perfect crit rate, you know, crit piece for this character. Thankfully, we are in the spot of the celebration where we can kind of just decide whatever we want to do with our stamina, right? You know, we're in the cooldown period, so you can really just keep just hammering away at grinding these pieces without much thought. But yeah, if your Nelliel's doing damage, if you have enough crit rate that she's critting consistently, remember you want about, I want to say like with Nelliel, with her incredible crit passive, I'd say you want about the high ends of 60 to 70% crit rate for sure, before you start worrying about ailment, because she just does so much with her ability to crit, right? I think she does a lot. How do I level up fast? Yeah, it's just spending stamina. Realistically, it's spending stamina. How do Gin players do the alternative technique attack? I see some not fully charge the attack, but instead doing multiple fan-shaped attacks in quick succession. This is his boundary. You need boundary 6 for this? I could be misremembering. Boundary 6 sounds right, though. Whoops. If I go here, that is the thing about boundaries and dupes and the like. Oftentimes, is this not? Yes, it is. While charging a technique, an additional wide area thrust attack is released without interrupting the charge. It is extremely strong. This is the thing about DPSs, and I do want to talk about boundaries here. DPS characters tend to get sort of like gameplay, sort of like collective big gameplay power-ups on their B6 that affect their actual sort of play style, right? Or their build types. I mean, Aizen gets multiplicative crit rate, and any crit rate converts to crit damage, which is fucking massive. For example, as well, Nelliel, she gets to throw her ult twice, right? Releasing Seto enables an immediate counterattack, yeah. And then during resurrection, the first hit of Lanzador causes 0 ult energy and does not end the resurrection state. Also refreshes heroic stomp and maxes out battle will, right? So these are usually gameplay, almost like upgrades, as well as having a like immediate effect on character power, like usually a massive character power bump. I will say that the characters will usually have at least one thing that they get that affects their gameplay style. Though some of these change. I will like Hitsugaya doesn't really have one that immediately affects like the things that he does. It just makes him better doing what he does. But oftentimes the character will have a breakpoint that literally just affects like what they're able to do. So in Aizen's case, you get a counterattack if you have his B4, right? So yeah, that's all it is really. More general question about feeding Frenzy, because on the internet all sorts of people say spam, get to 70k, and there are all sorts of posts, comments, or images which appear to suggest top players going 90 score, with certain instances of a person or people may claim to be able to get that using auto battle. My question is a bit more about how does a player start from the beginning and chart their strength in, for example, increments of 5k per battle score on their way to the coveted 70k. What essentially are the factors for the actual fact within Feeding Frenzy that make it different than co-op or guild challenge? And as far as I know, how do we play and track progress as we keep trying to inch closer towards 70k? How is the score calculated? If a player even needs to know this kind of statistic, which actions during a fight increases within Feeding Frenzy? So, this is pretty easy. Maybe this will be the last one. You know, we'll end it a little early here. Because I think this is a good question. Frenzy Feast is pretty simple. When you go in here, and you do your fight, one of them will have a bonus to it, so a 20%. This will be the specialized one. The reason this one is 20%, for example, is because it is thrust. It's thrust because Nelliel came out. Enemies take more thrust damage, reduces the enemy's defense by 50% when they are in spiritual pressure dissipation. You will get points based on the quickness with which you kill the character and the damage you do. So if I were to go in here and, you know, press this button, there would be a counter on the top left that showed the countdown of my score as well as the damage I was doing, and then in the middle here would be the actual time it takes to clear. The faster you complete these stages, the more score you get. You can see it goes over the allotted amount of points: 6,000 over 5,000, 6,900 over 6,000, and 8,100 over 7,000. All right. You'll typically, the only thing you need to know, and this is a thing that goes for every single version of this question in games that are particularly PvE focused, is that you need 3 teams and you need to start thinking about what that means. So in the case of my Kisuke Yudahara team, which is my thrust team, it's obviously the strongest team in the game, minus Yudahara. A lot of people are using Yudahara here. I did not use Yudahara here. The reason I did not use Yudahara here is because if I used Yudahara here, then my already very weak Spirit team would be that much weaker. I apparently didn't even do this one. I guess I got off and forgot to do this one, but that's very funny. I need to do this after I'm done with this question. That's hilarious. But we can see here, I had to use Byakuya and Yachiru for the Slash team, and that saves me the ability to put Yudahara or Aizen on my Spirit team. That is all this game is. That is all most like mono-based contents are in Bleach Soul Resonance. Because it's a weekly event sort of thing, we're probably never going to get a Frenzy Feast that is, you know, replacing it, that is like a you know, this is the hardest thing in the game and it's gonna like really test your ability to dodge and all this, and that's not what it's for. It's for giving you Jade. Just to go back to it, actually, like reminder, the reason they added auto to this, the reason that people just auto it and they don't really place, is because this exists to give you Jade weekly. 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 680 Jade total every week. That's all you need to do. You do not need to place in this event. You just need to get to 70,000. And once you're able to get like your teams down, you're going to be hitting that pretty consistently. So just continue to work on teams in bunches. In my case, my biggest like goal was to get Yudahara off every team that didn't need him. Because Yodohara and Aizen are going to naturally contribute a ton of score to most fights regardless of element type, right? So get Yodohara and get Aizen off of teams that don't need them. In my case, like when I play Toshido, because my Toshido is not that built, and you know, his gear's not that great, I tend to err on bringing a character like Aizen, bringing a character like Yodohara. But say it was like a Spirit and Strike Frenzy Feast, I mean, I'd be in a lot of trouble. Because Yoruichi and Komomura are good, Nemo is not that good. I would need to think then, do I go Yoruichi, Komomura, and Yodohara? Do I go Yoruichi, Komomura, Nemo and save that? Maybe go Toshido, Yodohara, and Aizen? Then what's my third team going to do? These are just the questions, right? So as you sort of filter out these questions, thankfully, we have the best team in the game on Thrust. And Thrust has one of the best supports in the game. So every time Thrust comes up, you will never have a question of who you're reading on Thrust. Right? That is why getting strong characters can matter, right? Can matter for, you know, your account rather than just like who you decide you want to pull. Now, Frenzy Feast isn't impossible to just do with free-to-play players. You could probably get Frenzy Feast to 70k just using Renji. I'd imagine so. It's weekly content meant for you to get scores. If you want to place though, making sure you get the strong mono characters like Gin, like Nelliel, like Sosuke Aizen, like Kenpachi, is going to continue to be like sort of like the burden on your Jade. But yeah, if you're just looking for your 680 Jade, just finish your teams. Are you done with your Yodohara? Move on to another character. You're done with your Aizen? Move on to another character. Now you need DPS. Pick 2 to 3 DPS that you want to carry those colors. Work on them. It doesn't matter which they are. Just work on them. Get them to about 25,000 power, which is around the max amount of power I've seen for completely unduped characters. You know, no core stamp dupes, no weapon dupes, no boundaries. That is sort of the game being played there, right? And let's actually one more. So here we have one final. This is the last one I saw that I was like, this is interesting. B1 Aizen or B0 Nell, or save for the next character. I'm free to play and they have every other character B0. And we got someone saying B1 Aizen. You know, we got Comprehensive Toe here, who is the maker of the thread, saying B1 Aizen. I disagree. B1 Aizen is, I mean, I guess you could use Tosen forever, but I mean, come on. This character is so crazy, and this character is not just going to be crazy for like the immediate. She is going to be crazy for a long time. Like, when are we going to realistically replace Nelliel? Not only is she going to be crazy for thrust units, but every ailment damage unit after is going to require to some degree Nelliel. It just sort of is what it is, right? I think if we have two strong, like impossibly strong characters, having one of each is stronger than having a duped one, to me. You want the characters so that when rerun banners happen in the future, maybe you consider, hey, I'm gonna go back actually grab myself a Nelliel dupe too, right? Maybe in the future you can decide, you know what, I really like Aizen. Regardless of if Aizen gets power crept, I think having Aizen, you know, boundary 4 would make me the happiest. I'm gonna go ahead and grab Aizen B4. Like, I don't think I would ever suggest not grabbing the new completely broken, completely dominant character and instead grabbing a boundary. I don't think there's any boundary one in the entire game that could like heft that burden. Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, even Kenpachi, whose boundary one is really good, there's no boundary one better than just grabbing a Nelliel, right? Like, am I crazy? Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe Aizen's B1 is infinitely stronger than I'm giving it credit for, but I'm pretty sure it's like really good. But there's just no way that it's better than having a full account. Because what that person says essentially is that they have all the limited characters except Nelliel. I mean, do you not want Nelliel? How would you... like, she's gonna be good for so long. Like, she's gonna be good for so long. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, but I think that'll be the end of this one. I would suggest Nelliel every time. That said, we are losing the banners pretty soon, so you guys are gonna have to start making decisions quick. We got 4 days on this one, 11 days here. It's crazy that we're already, you know, more than a week, more than 9 days, 10 days into Nelliel's banner at this point. But I've been Lone. These have been the weekly Mega Thread questions. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to join the club. We all gonna make it, and peace.